Welcome to episode 32 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today we're talking about the online sewing world with two of its longtime leaders, Mack and Kristin Link. Mack is a passionate sewist and quilt maker. She designs and publishes sewing patterns as Pink Chalk Studio. She's also the proprietress of Pink Chalk Fabrics, an online fabric store for modern sewists. She's recently made a sharp right turn in her creative business journey, making the decision to reinvent her Pink Chalk brand to better align with her life's purpose. Mack, welcome.
Thank you, Abby. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. Kristin Link is the owner of Sew Mama Sew, a blog founded in 2005, which currently hosts nearly 500 sewing tutorials. Kristin has a background in education and instructional design. She's contributed to several sewing books and magazines and has filmed 2 free classes with Craftsy. She lives in Oregon with her 2 daughters and husband. Kristin Link, welcome.
Hi, Abby.
Hi. I'm so happy to have both of you on the show. Thank you for joining me. One of the things I want to talk about with both of you is what it's like to make a major transition in the structure of what you're doing with your business, because I think that can be a really scary thing to face, but it can also save your business from becoming a burden or from disappearing completely. So, Kristin, we'll start with you. Tell me about the early days of Sew Mama Sew back in 2005 or even earlier when you were in the planning phases. What was your vision and what was the operation like way back when?
Well, Sew Mama Sew started as a spin-off I had a baby line, a line of baby clothes. And I was selling to small boutiques around the country, and I was buying fabric by the bolt. And there were some fabrics that I didn't use. So I started just kind of unloading those on my website. And some of the fabrics that I was selling were harder to find. And there just wasn't a lot of online fabric stores at the time. And I was having a hard time sourcing kind of hip, cool fabrics that I wanted to use. And I think there were just really a handful of online fabric stores. And so I started to get this idea I really would love to do this and just curate some really amazing fabrics. And so I started another site at the same time. And then I sold the baby business and I launched Sew Mama Sew.
Okay, so that explains the name.
Yeah. The baby business was called Go Goose Go, and so then I had Go Goose Go and Sew Mama Sew at the same time.
Which is adorable and totally goes together. I do wonder now when, and we'll talk about sort of what's happened between then and now.
Yeah.
Now, how are you feeling about the name, and have you considered a name change, or have you just decided this is what it is and we're going to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I do, have some regrets about that. And, but I think it's just, it's stuck there. I think it would be really hard for me to rebrand with the same kind of content and a name change.
Yeah, and it's funny, I actually had that same feeling. I started my blog as While She Naps before I had any idea at all of what was going to happen. And so now here we are, and it just is what it is, So,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so here we are. You started this business selling these curated fabrics, and that is what Sew Mama Sew was. And so it changed, though, as time went by. So tell me kind of the middle era, what happened in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I think, that very first year that I had the fabric shop open, I started a blog, and that was new too, because there weren't a lot of business blogs. I knew some friends who had personal blogs, and they were more like journals, more like a diary. And but I started a blog to write some sewing tutorials and things like that. And Beth Wilson, who works with me still, was one of my customers at the time, and somehow we started a conversation through email. And I said, "Do you want to write for my blog?" And she said yes. And so we started that, and then within a couple years, the blog was really gaining popularity. Actually, it kind of started right away. It wasn't. There just wasn't a lot of competition. There weren't a lot of sewing blogs. There weren't a lot of online fabric stores. So we got in pretty early and were able to get some followers. And then the blog just grew and grew over time to the point where it was time consuming, but it was, in some ways it was driving fabric traffic to the fabric store. But in other ways it felt like a separate business altogether. And so at some point I realized that I really was running two different businesses, but one of them was not revenue generating. It was kind of revenue sucking, the blog, because of all of our, the traffic was just, created really outrageous server fees. So I realized that I need to make a decision here. And at that point I chose to close the fabric store and monetize the blog.
That is so interesting. So, right, you had two separate arms of the business. One was basically a media arm, and one was like a sewing supplies, patterns, fabric arm.
Yeah.
And it's the one that was generating revenue is the one you decided to close.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I just did some number crunching and realized, that I could probably do better monetizing the blog and have less of, because no matter what, if I kept the fabric store open, I would have to keep the blog going. You just can't have a business, I don't think, without a blog to support it.
Right. So it was either keep both open, which is running two businesses, or pick the blog. That was the choice.
I mean, and it's not literally two businesses, but to me and my workload, it felt like my mind was divided between two things, between selling fabric and managing those employees, and between almost being like an editor. I kind of think of it as being like a magazine editor, this like you said, a media business. And so it wasn't literally two businesses, but, the blog was supporting the business, but still it was two different mindsets.
Right. Okay. So did you have, when we're talking about the fabric side, did you have like a warehouse or a storefront of some kind? Where were all the bolts kept, and where were the employees who were doing the cutting and the packaging? Where were they coming to work?
Yeah, I had a space that was in an office building, so it wasn't open to the public, but it was, definitely off-site. And so my employees would go to work there every day.
Okay. And how many employees did you have, roughly?
5.
Okay, so you had 5 employees, and so you had to let them go when you closed that portion of your business.
Yes.
So you shifted to just being you and your partner, Beth.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a pretty major shift. You gave up an outside space, and you gave up employees who were working for you, and really, I mean, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, it was really hard. Yeah.
I was going to say, was there some ego involved in saying to yourself, well, this part, not that it failed, because it wasn't failing, but that, you're going to let go of this part of the vision?
Absolutely. I think the ego part kept me hanging on for way longer than really I should have. I think I had the idea, the realization that I could probably make a go of just having the blog as my business maybe a year and a half before I actually cut loose and did that. So I definitely think, there's this attachment to my employees, and there's this attachment to my vision of the fabric store. There was my love of, curating the fabrics and all of that. So all of that kept me hanging on for longer than I should have, probably.
And then when you made the announcement, which I'm sure was kind of a scary day, I actually remember that day. But yes, I do. But when you made that announcement and sort of let everyone, all your readers and all your customers know, hey, you know what, we're going to do something major here and shift directions. What was that like for you, and what were their reactions?
Well, I kind of did it in a couple of phases. The first thing I did was I spent probably, I don't know, at least a month drafting a bunch of emails to my fabric reps and manufacturers. And I don't know, I have this long-standing, operational belief that I never burn a bridge and always, keep relationships going. So I drafted letters to my reps and the fabric manufacturers. I sent another letter. I had a different letter that went to our contributors, people who have written for us, and I had a different letter altogether for who were my competition at the time was the other online fabric stores. And so the day before I made the announcement on the blog that we were going to close, I shot out over 100 emails to all of those different groups of people and letting them know that this was my plan. And and then the day I announced on the blog, we did a newsletter in the morning, and I woke up and like half my inventory was already sold by 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, because there was just a major sale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So you sold off the inventory, and then a few months out, you've shifted gears. The fabric is gone, and you're really a media company. You're producing, like an online magazine essentially, which publishes twice a day and is the So Mama So that we think of now. So, like, how do you envision So Mama So right now? Like, when you meet people or when you know of other sewists who read So Mama So, how do you want them to describe it? Have you heard of So Mama So? It's a site that, like, what do you want them to fill in that blank with?
Oh, yeah. I would say that it's a site to go to first if you're looking for a sewing tutorial for a certain project. If you're looking for fun patterns and projects to do, that it's a site that you should browse first.
Okay, so you kind of feel as though it's like a first stop in the sewing world.
That's what I would hope, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great vision. I mean, I think it's important to sort of have that in your mind. Like, what are we aiming for here? What is this going to be, to differentiate it in the marketplace? Because there are so many sewing blogs. So it's, but I do think So Mama So is a standout, and I do think it's sort of like, it's almost like the number one media outlet. Like if you have a new book, and you're going to give away one free project from the book, and launch your book's blog tour, your first stop is So Mama So. I mean, would you agree that seems like the spot?
I would hope so, and thank you for saying that. But yeah, and that would be my goal, and to keep that going, and actually, and one of my bigger goals too is to broaden our readership to to other customer bases maybe that don't know about us. I do think that there's definitely pockets of people out there that we could still capture.
Yeah, who are some of those people?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of demographics. I think there's a younger demographic, and I also think that there's an older demographic that we could work on.
Yeah.
There's the older demographic, I think, are women that are already sewing. And then there's a younger demographic of women, I think, and I say women and men who are learning, up and coming.
Right. I agree with you. And if you look at like who's on Craftsy, I think Craftsy's main customers are actually older women. So.
I think Craftsy. I think they when they started off, they were they were targeting more of the middle grounds, and then they found out that it was actually the older demographic that was buying more classes.
Right. It's so interesting. So now your income on So Mama So, that pays the bills, the hosting fees and all the rest, and pays Beth as well. So you have, 2 people here, because it's a tremendous job to create a site like this and keep it going at the rate and quality that you do. That comes from advertising. Is that right? Is that where it all comes from, or almost all?
Yes. It's all of it.
It's all from advertising. And so I'm also imagining that managing the advertisers is a huge job as well. Soliciting ads, servicing the ads, all of the rest of that.
It is. It's a bigger job than I kind of thought it was going to be. It's a constant, everyday thing, but it's also really fun for me. And I think that it's something that, with my experience of running the shop and having the experience selling fabric, that I have a little bit more insight and am able to offer my advertisers, a little bit more of an experience than just throwing their banner up on our site. So we work together kind of behind the scenes on different things that even than just the banners.
Right, because you've been in their shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's true. All right, Kathy, we're going to turn to you and get a little bit of the background about Pink Chalk Fabrics. So,
okay,
you've just announced that Pink Chalk Fabrics will no longer be selling fabric, and you'll be focusing on designing and teaching, and you'll still be selling patterns online.
Mm-hmm.
So
correct.
Before we get into details of what led to this shift for you, just trace the journey of Pink Chalk from the early days. What were you doing when you started it, and how did it begin?
Sure. Well, I started my blog in 2006. And because I had discovered online sewing blogs, and I had sewn all my life, but I'd kind of put it away for a lot of years during years that I had my corporate career. And I had left that career to stay at home with my kids, and I started sewing again, a lot. And then I discovered sewing blogs, and I started a blog myself to just share what I was making. And so that's how it began. And about a year after I had started the blog, I created a gift for my mom, which was this portfolio. It was like a fabric portfolio, and people were kind of we want a pattern, we want a tutorial on how to do that. And it was more involved than just a simple tutorial. So I actually wrote my first sewing pattern, and I published it, and it was called The Note Taker. And I really enjoyed doing that. So I put time in earnest to begin writing sewing patterns. And I had a lot of initial success with that, which certainly motivated me to continue. But the reality of it at the time, they were printed patterns. And I remember someone telling me, well, if you sell 5,000 of a pattern design, that would be a huge success. And so I had my spreadsheet out, and it was okay, if I sold 5,000 of the mail sack, and I'm making, let's say, $6 wholesale, it's that's over the lifetime of the pattern. That's financially, that's not really going to provide a living for me. And so I had a lot of blog readers. I'd had success with the sewing patterns, and so I decided that I needed to basically sell other people's patterns, because I didn't think I could do the volume of business with my own and actually make a living that could support me. So the initial idea was to sell other people's patterns, and then fabric came into that mix as well. And I just started it, out of a spare bedroom in my home. I invested $10,000 initially into the business to purchase fabric with. And that's how I started. And I had the computer skills to get myself online. So I downloaded an open source shopping cart software, ZenCart, got it modified enough, and got myself up and running. And that was 2008. So Pink Chalk Fabrics launched in May of 2008. And then the journey just kind of continued from there.
Okay, so it really was blog to pattern designer to online storefront for other people's patterns, and then the supplies really to make those patterns.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, and then, all right, so now let's go to the middle phase. So at some point you moved out of the spare bedroom.
Yes. And so I moved to taking over. So I had the spare bedroom, took over half the office, and then at that point it was growing, but I was still nervous about moving it out of the house. So I made the decision, and my husband at the time, to take over like the downstairs dining room and front hallway, which I did, and I ran it, and then it started to spill into the living room. And at that point, after about 9 months of that, I decided it was time to get some commercial space. So in 2010, I moved it out of my house into commercial space, and that's where I'm still at. And I've expanded. I expanded about 2 years ago. We took on additional space, and that's where I am now. It's about 3,000 square feet, and we do everything here now.
Okay, so, and you have some employees.
Yes.
About how many do you have?
I have 7 employees right now.
Okay. All right. And this is not open to the public. It's just
No,
online.
It's not. Yeah, it's industrial, commercial space that's not even zoned for retail. I do open the space up. I host the Modern Quilt Guild here on Bainbridge Island once a month. And our local customers come in for local pickup, but we're not. And if somebody sometimes people visit and we welcome them in, and we sit them down at a computer and they can order, but it's not part of the business to do retail.
Right. Okay. So tell me a little bit about kind of the nitty-gritty of what it is to run an online fabric shop. Like, I want to hear about the cut, package, ship part that we don't get to see. We look at the pretty pictures online. We pick what we want. We process our payment, and a few days later, a pretty package arrives from Pink Chalk. So what happened in between there? Like, what does it really look like day to day?
Yeah, there's. I kind of view it as 3 different pieces, and one is that cut, package, and ship process, which is totally operational, and it happens the same way, Monday through Friday. Basically, we come in, the orders are printed out. I've got a team of people that come in and cut fabric, and then it gets reviewed, and then it gets packaged up, and then we've got somebody that does the mail in the afternoon, and then it all goes to the post office. And that process occurs every day of the week. And there's a lot that goes on in that process. There's a need for accuracy. There's a need to kind of adhere to standards I've set for packaging, and how things are folded, how things go in the package. And there's a lot of complexity to shipping, ensuring it's kind of the least cost option. And then you have like all the exceptions if there's short yardage, or something's out of stock that we didn't realize was out of stock. There's a lot of inventory management that goes into it. There's flaws in the fabric. There's kind of like all these little exceptions that occur in that process. And then the second piece of it is the new product coming in the door. And we scan, I've always scanned all my own images. That's kind of a personal thing of presenting a consistent scanned image of basically every piece of fabric that I sell. It's an 8.5 by 8.5 inch image of that fabric, because it was important to me to provide scale. So we scan all of our product and get that entered into the online web shop. And then there's a marketing component that goes on that I kind of view it as like lifestyle photography. And I've always had this goal of taking photos that kind of give someone an experience of walking into a quilt shop, so that, you know, when you see that display of fabric, I think it's inspiring. It gives you ideas about what your project might be. We do a lot of color matching and provide that information visually online, so that, again, there's kind of that inspiration piece of, hey, what could I do with this, and how does it match solids, which is one of my interests and one of our specialties here. And that social media piece has just grown over the years. It used to be just the blog, and then came Facebook and Pinterest, and then we started with Instagram last year, and then Twitter's kind of on the side. We push our stuff to Twitter, but it's not an active social media platform for us. And as I've grown, I actually have somebody that's almost pretty much full-time writing the blog and doing all that photography and social media stuff. And then customer service is a big part. I have a full-time person for customer service. I have an 800 number, so we take orders over the phone, and we respond to phone requests as well as email.
Okay.
And so
yeah, this is a giant job.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's kidding here. This is huge.
Exactly.
It is a ton of work. I mean, really.
Well, then there's the whole technology piece as well, and that's, yeah.
Right, sort of the maintenance of the site itself.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Right, which can also be a full-time job. I mean, there's really, it's a lot. There's so many components there. So one question I have is about sort of online fabric shops in general. What do you feel like an online fabric shop can offer that maybe a local quilt shop can't? And sort of, you know, I think that there's a lot. I don't know, there's sort of a feeling like, well, you should support your local quilt shop, and you absolutely should. But I think it's also important to realize that an online fabric shop like Pink Chalk Fabrics is also a mom and pop venture in the same way that my local quilt shop is. But it can offer somewhat different products. So tell me about sort of what it can offer that's different.
Yeah, for me, in terms of what I view that I offer that's different is, like, for example, the Kona cotton solids that I carry over like 250 colors. And that's something that it would be very difficult for a local quilt shop to carry, say, that size of that depth of inventory. And I think the advantage for an online shop is, like, I've always carried only what I like. So when I buy fabric, I buy what I like, and that's what I limit my offering to, which includes, you know, full collections of all these different solids, as well as a lot of basics. And there's a lot of local quilt shops. First of all, they wouldn't have the square footage to support that. And on a regional basis, they've got to appeal to a regional customer base, where I've always had this attitude that I just do what I do, and then people find me and my customers find me. And when they see that and it's what they like, then that person becomes my customer. So I don't have to appeal to a wide spectrum of tastes. I just do what I do.
Right.
So I think that's mostly, you know, for me, the difference between what I can do online that I could not do if I was just a local quilt shop.
Right, and those are two really important and valuable things. You know, so you don't have to be limited by what you can fit. I mean, you have this industrial space, so it doesn't have to be beautiful. And you have a global audience. So if you want to appeal, for example, to sort of people with more modern tastes, and maybe where you live, that's not the, you know, majority of shoppers, that's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's really significant. And so, all right, so let's talk a little bit about this shift now. So a few weeks ago, you announced that you're going to sort of, as you put it, be making a sharp right turn.
Yep.
So what is the sharp right turn about, and kind of what what were the months like that led up to it? Like, what was going through your mind?
I think it's something that I've been noodling over for a friend of mine told me I started talking about this 2 years ago, which I don't really remember, but certainly since last fall in earnest, I've really been taking a hard look at what my day looks like and what my work looks like day to day. And, I think I kind of came at it from two different places. And one for me is just personal on what I want to do personally, what I want, kind of who I am and what kind of fuels me creatively and I've always taken an approach with my work, my financial work or what I do to make money, attempting to align that kind of with my own value system. And, but I'm also a business person too. And so I also was looking at it financially, and it's the bottom line for me is the fabric piece of the business. It was not providing me with the financial returns that I wanted. And I took a really hard look at what I thought I would need to do to meet those financial goals. And I'll be honest, I just didn't see a way to do what I wanted to do and make it work for me. It didn't seem like it was worth the investment, both financially or in terms of the amount of work that it would take. And the things that I felt needed to happen were like a new website that took advantage of new technology, basically things to increase revenue and continue to cut costs. And the level of changes that would have to take place to make that a viable financial thing for me, at the end of the day, I just didn't want to do it. It's like I don't want to do a new website, and I.
Can I just interject there?
Sure.
I came to that exact same crossroads too at one point, and I had looked at all the different platforms out there for e-commerce, and I had talked to a bunch of people, and I talked to some designers, and then I was like, I really don't want to do this. And then, that was kind of like my decision was finally made for me.
Mm-hmm. And that's,
I'm
that's
curious,
where I ended up.
What is it about this idea of having to make a new website for a new e-commerce site that just feels like, ugh, I can't go there?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the realities of running a business online and running it from your own website is, for me, I'll speak for myself. There's a level of technological advancement and innovation that's taking place in online retail right now that you need to keep up with. And my website is obsolete basically in terms of technology. I cannot move forward technology wise with where I'm at. I'd have to move to a new platform. And I actually started a project last year with a local company, and I pulled the plug on it at the end of the day because it wasn't what I wanted, and it was going to cost a lot more money as well. And the problem is there's not enough money. I wasn't making enough money to fund that for it to make sense as an investment. And I don't want to continue to do that development work myself. I'm capable of doing it, and the problem is I don't see a way to pay somebody else to do it and have it be a cost-effective investment for the company. So I really do feel as though I just reached a wall of do I want to do this or not? And I don't. It's not how I want to spend my time.
Right. So going forward, what is your business going to look like? Or are you still kind of figuring that path out? I mean, it's really early after your announcement. So
yeah, and I kind of I just kind of go with my intuition oftentimes, and my gut, and I have some kind of back of the envelope ideas about how to make it work financially and meet my own personal objectives, creative objectives. So I just kind of made a list of things that I feel can generate revenue in a way that doesn't involve that whole operational thing that we talked about with, managing 7 employees and managing this day-to-day operation. And so for me, that ended up being that I kept the pattern component of the business, which is selling downloadable patterns by other designers as well as printed patterns. And when I looked at the revenue generated by that specific category, it's kind of like, wow, why am I doing all of this other stuff when the revenue generated by just the patterns is in an amount that I can actually make a go of this, and it's something I could run from my bedroom if I wanted to. And so that was the first piece. And ultimately, emotionally, I wanted to keep the brand. I didn't want to sell it. And so I decided that, okay, I can keep the brand, I can keep the patterns, and then I do plan on monetizing the blog. I've never taken, and the newsletter, I've never taken advertising in my newsletter or on my blog all these years. And so that is something I'm going to do, because I never wanted that competition with my fabric shop, because the reality is the majority of people that do advertising are other fabric shops. And so that gives me the option now to take that type of advertising. So that could be an income flow. I also, earlier this year, I had a opportunity to do a presentation and teach a class at the Kitsap Quilters Guild and here in my local area. And I loved that. I did that in June, and when I left the class after that day and the presentation the couple days before, I felt so energized by the experience. And it's I've got to do more of this because this really fills up my tank. And so that's a third piece of this, is I would like to just get back to designing and teaching because that's what I love to do. And that's really what my blogging and my business started out as, was me writing about how to sew. And sharing that with other people. And that really is still what I want to do. And the growth of the fabric business over time just demanded more and more of my my time in a way that I no longer was doing the creative parts of the business.
Right. So the blog will now go back to being your voice.
Yeah, which I'm kind of excited about because I reached a point in blogging where I felt like I'd said everything I wanted to say. Because for me, the first years of that blog were really important to me personally. It was a way to express a part of me that had been silent for a long time. And then I reached a point where, as the business grew, it was almost too overwhelming for me. And I didn't want to connect any longer in that platform. But now I'm kind of back to where, hey, maybe I think I have some more things to say, and I'm looking forward to writing again.
Yeah,
and
I think you definitely
on a
have,
personal level.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot to say, so I'm looking forward to reading what you write. And Kristin, just to get back to Sew Mama Sew, so you also were selling patterns designed by other people, both print and PDF, I think. And chose to close that portion of Sew Mama Sew as well. And I just wanted to go back and make sure we touched on why you chose to do that. Because as Kathy said, that kind of stuff is a little easier. There's not, bolts of fabric and cutting and all of that kind of thing. So why did you also decide to close that part?
Well, because I wanted to I didn't want to put myself in a position where I was competing with any of my potential advertisers. So I would just decided, like, I'm just going to completely get out of the business of selling sewing stuff. And then there's no rub there when it comes to working with my advertisers.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And you still write for Sew Mama Sew. I mean, periodically there will be an article or a tutorial. There was one recently written by you, and but I would say most of the content is written by contributors. And do you miss writing for it more, or are you happy with the mix here? Do you feel a little bit like Kathy, like I'd like to get back to doing it more? I mean, how are you feeling about that?
Well, I can, whenever I feel the urge, I can definitely throw something up there. So I don't feel like I don't have that opportunity. Sew Mama Sew has never really been my voice. I've always just, I don't know, I'm more of a private blogger. I've never really written about my children and, my home life and things like that. I've always just kept it straight up sewing blog. And so I don't know, that aspect of it, of having a voice of my own there, it's never been an appeal to me.
For you. Okay. All right. So the mix is good. Okay, so I think if it's okay with you guys, we can shift over to kind of talking about our recommendations, unless there was something sort of important for people to know about both of these businesses and blogs and how they've shifted over time and what it was like to make that shift that you wanted to add.
Well, can I bring up something completely different? Well, but it's related. And, there's just been a lot of talk online lately because when Kathy made her announcement that she was closing, within the same week, there were 3 other online fabric stores that announced at the same time. So there's been a lot of, Sandra at Contemporary Cloth is one of them, and she has been open since 2001. And there's just been a lot of talk on Facebook about, why and how and, what to do. So I don't know. I guess I'd be interested to hear what Kathy has to say about all this too. But I do think that there's some issues about the way that people in this industry pay themselves and get paid. It's not just online fabric store owners. I do think that there is this tendency in the industry to follow your passion is such a phrase that people toss around. And so it's hard to follow your passion and then draw the line at some point and say, okay, well, I'm passionate about this, but I need to get paid at the same time. So I was guilty of that. I loved my fabric store. I needed to have that fabric store. I felt like I was really living the dream, but then I really wasn't paying myself a living wage. And, I just wanted to kind of be honest about that. I don't think that a lot of fabric designers are making I think people would be shocked at what fabric designers make, how little they make. And that forces them to do things like turn to designing collections for Joann's, which in turn I think perpetuates the just problems with the industry and small business. So.
Yeah, right. Because you're right. I mean, people don't feel free, I feel like, to talk about those financial realities. And as you probably know, I'm a huge proponent of talking about financial realities. I just posted my 3rd quarter income report on my blog this week. So I definitely feel like it's important. And the reason that I do it, beyond sort of being slightly crazy, is that I feel like it's important for people to see, like, this is what it takes and this is what comes in for all of that work.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, and unless people say it, you're left guessing, and things that seem incredibly prestigious, and I want that for myself someday. aren't also followed up by, well, how much does it cost to, buy an entire collection of fabrics to cut up and resell online? I mean, what is the real cost basis here? And can you afford to do this? It's a dream to design fabric or just to run an online fabric shop, but what is the real money involved here?
Yeah, the Fab Shop Network, which is an industry trade publication, did a survey of fabric store owners, and mostly their local quilt shops. And I don't even remember what it was, Kathy. Maybe you saw that, but it was something like
I remember that.
30% of shop owners weren't even paying themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's an industry that's being run on passion. Rather than any kind of sound business decisions.
And how much of that, in your opinion, is because it's an industry run by women? I mean, I feel like, predominantly. Now, maybe not at the top level. Sort of maybe at the top level, it actually is run by men. Sort of in the ownership level. Am I right? I mean, am I making that up?
Yeah,
okay.
definitely.
I feel like at the top echelon, it's run by men, and then it's sort of the passion level, it's run by women, and that is where the disconnect is coming.
Yeah, I agree. I have worked with SCORE a couple of times, their SCORE is like, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but they're business advisors. They're usually retired business owners, successful business owners, and then they volunteer to help, entrepreneurs. And I've worked with them several times, and it's usually, older white men, and they always look at my numbers like I am crazy. And they just, I think it's probably a symptom of the industry, and that it is women, and I don't know, I don't really know what to say about that, except that I think your observation is correct, and
and I guess I feel like it's time for us to start talking about these issues. Like, I feel like the more women who are small business owners in the sewing industry and are willing to stand up and say, like, this is what it is, this is what, these contracts are offering, et cetera. And, the better off we are, because we all know what the numbers are. I mean, if you're making these decisions in the dark and you don't know what the numbers are, how can you really advocate for yourself? That's my thinking.
Yeah, I agree, Abby. And that's from my standpoint. Yeah, somebody called me last week, actually, and I ended up chatting with her on the phone. And when anyone reaches out to me for a conversation about this topic, I'm always up for it, because, and I look forward to writing about it more too, because, for me, I'm a single mom now. I've got two teenagers, a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. I mean, I support myself. I don't have any other sources of income. So I think in some ways that's a good thing. Like, if I had a husband that was like paying all the bills and taking care of everything, maybe I'd just keep running the fabric shop, and not making enough to support myself. But the fact that I have that, I have that limitation where I need to support myself, it actually, I feel like in some ways it makes me more creative, and it pushes me forward in a way. So I'm actually grateful for that opportunity to be able to say, okay, I really have to make this work, and how am I going to do it? But I do think, because there is a lot of kind of denial too about being in, and the ego comes in of creating something and having something. But yeah, financially, if it's not working from a business perspective, we need to continue to have those conversations, and also, as designers and authors and all of that kind of stuff, we need to be we need to be savvy about how we negotiate contracts and our rights to our designs, and what we're getting paid for different things. I've had a lot of experiences over the last 7-8 years of and this whole thing about what we provide for free, and also then from a business perspective, what I pay people, and there's small things, even with the Chalk Talk newsletter, whenever I feature a customer project, I always give them a $20 gift certificate, because it's important for me to say, I'm using your project to make money for my business. And you need to be remunerated in some way, right? That's, I could just say, oh boy, look, I'm featuring your project, thanks. And that should be enough. And I think a lot of people sometimes just want to see their work featured, or they want to see it celebrated, and then they don't get paid for it. And I do think we need to continue that conversation so that people, as designers and creators, we get paid fairly for our contributions and our work.
Kristin, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that that's something that you think a lot about the people who design all of these different tutorials and patterns and projects for Sew Mama Sew, and your sort of feeling about how are you working with them to make it worth their while? Because I know that's a big topic that you think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to pay people because, especially when we want to have, we might have 15 or 20 different contributors in a month, and I don't have that kind of payroll capacity. But what we have tried to do is come up with a way to compensate people through gift certificates to our fabric shops that are our sponsors. So this is our model right now, is that we feel like it's kind of a win-win for everybody, where the fabric store will provide a gift certificate for the contributor, and in exchange, then we put their banner on the post that they've written as that this is sponsored by this fabric shop, and that seems to work pretty well for right now. We're talking about maybe a different model where we're actually hiring just a certain group of contributors and paying them cash.
And, so I'm imagining the revenue part of it has to grow enough and be stable enough that you feel as though, if you're going to bring on this group of people, you're promising them a certain level of compensation that you have to then be able to follow through on. So you have to feel confident that that's what you can afford.
Exactly. Yeah. It's hard to get to that point, but we would like to. But I've always felt like, we need to compensate in some way, even if it's just like a token of our appreciation. So we've always provided gift certificates, or we do ad exchanges too. So some of our contributors, we just throw their banner up on our site for a few weeks.
Right. And I remember even when you had the fabric shop, you would send your own fabric to contributors to make projects with. That would then be posted on Sew Mama Sew's blog.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. It's such a big topic to think about, because you do have tremendous traffic to offer. I mean, you're one of the top sewing blogs, so you're going to be sending lots of traffic, and so I think there could be a tendency to say, well, I'm paying you in traffic.
Yeah,
you're getting links, and that's what you're getting, and what you do with it is up to you. But if you contribute to us, we pay you in traffic. But is traffic really compensation?
Yeah. And, I think that the traffic is great, and that's probably the main reason that most people do it, because then, it's a $60 gift certificate doesn't really compensate people for the amount of time it takes to write a tutorial usually. But at least it's something, and it's a gesture that we feel is important, because we just want people to know that to understand that we appreciate them and want to pay them, and we do what we can.
Right. That's just such a good point. All right, I want to squeeze in one recommendation at least. So here we go. Kathy,
okay.
We're going to start with you. You had a lot of really, really good ones on this list, and I'm going to have a hard time. Did one pop out for you that you were dying to talk about before?
Yeah, I mean, the big one. Besides my new tennis shoes, I'm loving them. But
which say the name of those so we can look them up.
Yeah, those on it. It's Onitsuka tiger
Okay.
shoes.
And I'll
love
link to
them.
them on Zeppo.
Okay, perfect. But the big thing is that book that I read, The War on Art, by Stephen Pressman. I read that. A friend of mine told me about that book about a month ago, and I finally put it on my Kindle, and I read it in this 24-hour time span. I could not put it down, and it was like this book that so accurately articulated my inner world of thought that it was just so powerful. And it really had a big effect on me, because it talks about kind of the first part of the book is about our fears. And, it's like this fear of our greatness, of our magnificence, and letting that out. And then it kind of moves into we, as creators, as artists, as creative people, we owe it to the world to let those gifts sing. And then it kind of moves into, it's kind of just this huge motivational book wrapped around just I've never read anything that so accurately kind of just got to my core, of how I feel about this whole thing that I'm doing. And I would just love for people to read it and write me and talk about it.
Okay, cool. I'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay.
So The War of Art by
Thanks.
Stephen Pressfield. It sounds great, and it sounds like great timing too. You can't.
It was like a gift.
Yeah, how you come across the right book at the right moment. I love that. So, and Kristin, your list is all books. And they're all fiction that you're sort of returning to. And so was there one that you really think people should get and should read?
Oh, well, I don't know. Like, as I mentioned to you in my email, that I was just really frustrated with contemporary fiction that was being released, just because it kept, I don't know, the themes kept coming up, repeating themselves, and everything seemed like it was all young adult stuff. And anyway, and part of a series, I just got so frustrated with stuff that was coming out now. So I started exploring books from the, previous decades that I've missed. So I guess there's one that I recently read that I recommend people read, especially if they're like Downton Abbey fans. It's Remains of the Day. It's just such a beautiful book, so I would recommend that one.
And I love to revisit classics, because I feel like no matter how well educated you are, there are books that you just missed, you just never got to David Copperfield, it just
exactly.
didn't happen, and I never read Moby Dick. I mean, it's terrible, but here we are. So, I feel like let's go back and read them. And I mean, they're famous and well-known and classics for a reason, and maybe you like it and maybe you don't, but one ought to read them and find out what they're about. So, yeah, I agree with you. And I have one recommendation, which is something I tried last night with my artist group. It's called gelatin printing. I don't know if you've ever done this before. It's cool. You make gelatin in a sheet pan, and it's really strong. So you use clear gelatin with no flavor, and you use 12 packets for 2 cups of water. So it's this really thick, strong gelatin. You let it sit overnight in your refrigerator.
Like rubber.
Yeah, when you take it out of the sheet pan, it literally is like rubber. It's like a rubber pad, basically. And then you can use acrylic paint or special block printing ink, whatever. I have acrylic paint. So, and then you use a brayer. You roll it out and you just ink up the whole plate. Okay. And then you put some stencils down. You can just cut out some squares and some circles, hole punch, whatever. Put them all over, and then lay a piece of paper on top and just rub. And then take it off. And you have a print, and then you can print the ghost. So you can take off all of the stencils and then print the ghost on a separate piece or back on that same piece. And then you can clean off the gelatin, spray it with some water, and wipe it clean with paper towels, and print another on top or another piece. And you can keep going. The gelatin lasts in your refrigerator for a week, and you can use that thing for a long time. When it gets really warm, apparently, it kind of loses its effectiveness, so you should sort of stick it back in the fridge. But it's really, really cool. They sell these gelatin plates that you can buy for $20, and they last forever, but this is one you can make at home. And if you don't have a printing press and you like printmaking, so cool. And it's not something I would ever have done, but I'm in this artist group locally, and we did it last night, and it was so fun. So
Cool.
Yeah, I recommend it if you're looking for some creative experimentation. So. Well, Kathy and Kristin, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the While She Naps podcast. I really enjoyed talking to both of you, and I feel like I learned a lot from talking to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And you can visit Kathy online at pinkchalkfabrics.com and Kristin at sewmamasew.com. And you've been listening to the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg, and I invite you to visit my blog, whileshenaps.com, where you'll find helpful information for creative entrepreneurs, as well as tutorials and patterns for making stuffed animals and dolls. If you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.